They say this is a weak wide receiver class, but I disagree. There's heaps of value to be found in the late rounds in this year's rookie drafts. We cover it all on the Fantasy First Down. I'm Ben Wasley. Welcome to the Fantasy First Down. Today we're talking wide receivers. If, on the other hand, you're interested in the other positions, make sure you check out the quarterback and running back shows on YouTube. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments below, and you can also hit us up on Instagram and Twitter. Now, if you want to check out my full rankings, not only these, but also Dynasty rankings, they're up at ffdfantasyfootball.com. If it's down briefly, we are moving it across to our new website design that will be happening in the current days, but it should be up there very soon. Anyway, today we're talking wide receivers, so let's get into it. And there's a lot of interest at the top here. Obviously, Travis Hunter went off the board first, and he's very difficult to draft in fantasy because you don't really know what you're going to get. It is looking more and more likely he's going to be used as a wide receiver, but I feel like there's plenty of risk here. I think there's a risk that he gets injured because they're trying to use him on both sides of the ball, and he hasn't got through a full season of college yet. I also think there's risk that they eventually recognize that transferring him to cornerback is the better option. Having said that, we haven't seen a wide receiver drafted in the top 2 picks since Calvin Johnson way back when. So when you're using this much draft capital, you're going to use your guy. The issue, of course, here is where they use him. I expect that he's probably going to be a slot receiver early on. I think he's probably the wide receiver too, behind Thomas, but we might see that he moves past Brian Thomas at some point in the future. Regardless, he's going to be a real weapon, and for me, he's a top 3 option in every single rookie draft. The real question is whether you take him ahead of Tetero or McMillan. For me, I think McMillan has a little bit more upside. He's got that big wingspan. I feel like he's going to be the clear number 1 in Carolina based on everything else they've got. I think he's a red zone weapon. He's going to get you touchdown points. And I feel like long-term, he probably is a little bit more secure as someone that's going to at least stay in his position. They're probably pretty close to me. Certainly in PPR, they're close. I think in a half PPR, McMillan goes ahead of him. In full PPR, I would consider Hunter at 2. Now, things get very interesting if your league for some reason gives IDP points for offensive players. I know that some leagues do that occasionally. In that case, I'd even consider Hunter number 1 over Genty because those extra points are going to make a massive difference. So make sure you're very aware of how your league works, whether you get IDP points and whether you get IDP points for being in an offensive position or a defensive position, because that makes a big difference. Regardless, your top 3 picks should be Genty and Hunter and McMillan. The choice of order is up to you and really depends on what you need, how much risk you're willing to take, and what else is going on with your team. Now, there is a really big gap for me after those top 2 guys. I'm not sure that any other wide receiver deserves to even be in the first round of rookie drafts. Probably, I think that Golden Egbuka and maybe Burden are on the very end of it. But I would be taking, at least 4 running backs. I'd be taking Cam Ward in Superflex, and I'd probably be taking Tyler Warren ahead of all these other wide receivers. Egbuka went off the board next, and he's a good player, and I did have him as my 3rd wide receiver, including Hunter, when it comes to ability. I don't really believe in Matthew Golden. I feel like he's a little bit of a speed guy, and there's not so much nuance to his game. I think Egbuka is a better all-round receiver. So I do like the player, but I hate the situation that he's going into. Having said that, long-term, I do think he's going to be very good for Dynasty. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin aren't going to be around for long, so Egbuka can come through and be their number 1 receiver. He doesn't profile as a true alpha number 1, but I do still think he's good enough. He's got excellent deep speed. He's a solid route runner. A little solid yak. I feel like he can offer enough to be good for Dynasty, but you're going to have to wait, and he's not got that much upside, especially compared to the top 2 guys and most of the top guys that we have coming through most years. We're not talking about a guy who's going to be a top 12 receiver at some stage in the future. At best, he's probably topping out as a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 in fantasy in the future. So for that reason, don't spend up on him. He's just a good bench guy to have and move up into your Dynasty team moving forward. Matthew Golden does have a little bit more upside. if he can transition into a more well-rounded receiver, I can imagine him being a true number one guy, but I don't really understand what the Packers were doing by drafting him. They've got a whole heap of smaller speed guys that they can use. I understand that Christian Watson's probably going to be out long-term, and that is definitely going to hurt, of course, and that Golden can kind of come in and replace that. They do kind of use Jalen Reed as their number one guy, but he's not out there more than about 60 to 70% of snaps. So they did have a gap they needed to fill, and Dontavian Wicks wasn't going to do it, and Romeo Dobbs isn't the number one guy. So they needed a clear alpha. I just don't think Matthew Golden made sense here. Having said that, he's on the team now. I think for fantasy, he makes a little bit more sense than Egbuka because he is going to be that number one guy. It's an offense that doesn't pass very much, but they pass enough. He's got excellent deep speed, which is really going to help you out. So I do feel like ultimately there's going to be some big plays in this game. The problem is in a PPR situation, he's not going to be so much of a possession receiver. So for that reason, I'm still not willing to take him higher than most of the non-wide receivers that belong in the first round. I would be considering him around 10th or 11th. I think any earlier than that. And I feel like you're going to really risk being disappointed. Jaden Higgins went off the board next, and I don't know. I don't love this pick by the Texans. I understand what they're trying to do. Tank Dell's going to be out. They've gotten rid of Stephon Diggs, but they've got Christian Kirk in there already. They've got plenty of other depth options. I don't think they needed to do this, and I feel like Higgins was a bit of a risk when Burden might have made more sense. I feel like Higgins isn't that far off Nico Collins. I think they're kind of similar, and Nico Collins is only 26, so it's not like he's aging out anytime soon. So I feel like maybe a better positional fit would have been Burden, but they've gone for Higgins. I don't think there's much of a path for him to be a number one receiver anytime in the near future. And from a fantasy perspective, I feel like that really lowers his floor. He's already got a low floor in the first place because he's not the most nuanced receiver. He's a big guy. We know he has pretty solid speed, but his separation is a major concern. He's more of a contested catch guy than a real athlete. I know that he looked impressive at the combine, but I feel like in play, it doesn't really come out that way. So I think he's got a real possibility that he disappoints. Think someone like a Quentin Johnston or someone like that his lack of separation really was an issue in the NFL. And I have the same concerns around Jaden Higgins. So for that reason, for me, I wouldn't be considering him until mid-second round, maybe, especially because in a PPR league and most dynasty leagues are PPR leagues, there is the risk that he's going to be more of a touchdown-dependent guy rather than a reception-dependent guy, and that sucks for PPR. Luther Burden, on the other hand, I think is the kind of guy that could suck up a whole heap of receptions. They've already got DJ Moore as their elite wide receiver. Odunze is obviously very good in the red zone. He's kind of that big-bodied guy. I feel like Burden comes in, he kind of does what Keenan Allen was doing before, and we know that that can be excellent for PPR. So I feel like Luther Burden is more of a weapon. I would consider him late first round, early second round. Very good route runner, excellent after the catch. I feel like he could be really good for fantasy, and he's going to be, I wouldn't say more reliable, but I at least think there's a clearer role there. I don't feel like someone like Colston Loveland is going to come in and just suction up all those targets that would have gone to the wide receivers otherwise. The problem is with Burden, he is clearly the number 3 guy, and that does put him behind Golden for me at least, and Egbuka is just playing a better receiver. So Burden's number 5 for me. I'd consider him late first. I'd prefer him early second if I had the choice. Trey Harris comes next, and I kind of like this situation for him. Ladd McConkey is clearly the number 1 guy in the slot, but it's a pretty open depth chart other than that. Quentin Johnston hasn't exactly proven himself. I'm not believing anything in Mike Evans. So Trey Harris is the guy that I really like here as that big-bodied, possible number 1 guy. McConkey, I know, has been the guy through the slot, but you need that number 1 outside receiver, and I do feel like he has the possibility to become that guy. My major concern for him is that, look, he is big, and he is a clear outside receiver, but is he going to get enough targets, especially with McConkey around, and especially in pretty run-heavy offense that just brought in a very good running back? I don't know that that's going to be the case, and that's why I've got him a little bit low. But early second round, I feel like he's worth the risk because there's really not much else going on in this draft. I feel like by that point, Cam Ward will be off the board in a Superflex league, and even in a non-Superflex, he might be gone, though he shouldn't be. Jackson Dart might be in Superflex, but again, he shouldn't be. You're going to see all of those wide receivers, except maybe Higgins above him, gone. You're probably going to see 4 to 6 running backs and both tight ends gone. So For that reason, we're talking pick 16 or so, and you're probably still getting a chance of getting Trey Harris. For me, that's excellent value, and this is the type of range that I'd be targeting to get picks in because you're going to get so much value with these wide receivers. Jack Besh as well. I mean, it's a great story, and there's an open depth chart here, so there are possibilities. The issue for me is, I don't know. I feel like there's some minor separation issues. I don't think that he really looked so good in college that he deserved to be in second round pick. I feel like the Raiders, it's just an ugly situation where they're going to want to run the ball a lot. They're going to rely on Brock Bowers too. So when you look at this depth chart, you go, oh, that's pretty juicy. Myers and Tucker aren't anything special. Myers is really a number 2 receiver. But then you think you got Genty out of the backfield. You got Brock Bowers, who's the true number 1 guy, and they're going to have Michael Mayer out there a lot. So that means that Beck might not even see the field a lot of the time. So it really depends on how he goes relative to Tucker. They took him in the second round, so that means something. He's going to be involved. I just think it's hard for him to be a really true, even number 2 guy in this offense with everything else they got going on. I feel like a fantasy is more likely to be a disappointment. So for that reason, I'm thinking later second round is really where I'd prefer to take him. I'd much rather even the mid-range running back options than someone like Beck because of how much risk there is given this situation. Having said that, to me, he's still a better option than any of these guys who are closer to third round guys, maybe very late second round guys. I'm talking about guys like Kyle Williams, who goes into a very open depth chart. I understand that Stephon Diggs is nominally the number 1 guy, and then there's just a whole lot of names. I think that Pop Douglas probably ends up staying as the slot receiver, but there's going to be a fight between guys like Booty and Bourne and everyone else. And don't forget about Polk, who was obviously taken early last year. I know that we get excited about Williams, but realistically, I think there's a real risk that he's not even a starter here. We've seen the Patriots do that before. This is an ugly situation. I don't expect him to come in and make an immediate impact, and I feel like there's a really low floor. Having said that, the upside is also pretty high. They've finally got a good quarterback in Drake May. They're finally able to protect him. The offense should be better than it was last year. I do think there's enough upside that I'm willing to take him late second or early third. I just feel like you really need to lower your expectation to recognize this is more of an upside pick rather than a situation where you should expect him to necessarily perform. Same kind of situation with Isaac Teslar. The best situation here is the number 3 guy. Actually, I guess the best situation is that Jamison Williams gets traded. I don't think that's going to happen. For that reason, Teslar kind of comes in as someone to challenge Tim Patrick as the number 3 guy. I don't think that's happening out of the gate. I feel like he's just a little bit raw. This was very much a reach, especially given they gave up multiple thirds to go up and get him. That seems ridiculous to me, but that draft capital is going to tell, and they are going to feel locked into using him. So for that reason, I do think he's someone that you can expect to at least have some sort of role. It's just that in this offense, when they've got those guys, when they've got Sam Laporta, when they've got such a strong running game, even though they score a lot of points, there's not enough to go around for the third wide receiver. So if Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamison Williams are still there, doesn't matter if Teslar's the starter. Realistically, you're going to be feeling very nervous about using him every week, especially in PPR. Now, Pat Bryant, someone I've heard talked about a lot. I don't even see him getting a starting role. I think Cortland Sutton is locked in. I think they really like Marvin Mims, and Devon Vele and Troy Franklin are a real risk of being ahead of Pat Bryant. He didn't belong anywhere near the second round. This is a massive, massive reach, and I don't like that they picked him here. Teslar was a little bit of a reach, but he at least has some upside. He's very athletic. He could project to be a good player in the future. I don't see that with Pat Bryant. I think he should have been taken in the 4th, 5th, 6th rounds and be someone that's lower down the depth chart that you slowly develop over time. I can't imagine Bryant coming in and having an immediate role. Having said that, they did pay a third rounder for him, so there is the risk they're going to use him, but it's not like they took him that far ahead of they took Troy Franklin last year, and this was a far weaker draft than last year. They clearly felt like they needed something in this area, but if they were desperate, they would have taken somebody earlier. They did use a couple of picks on needs that weren't particularly strong. So if they felt like wide receiver was a big issue, they could have taken him in the 1st or 2nd. The fact that they went for Bryant in the 3rd doesn't say that much about him. I'm not excited about him in fantasy at all. I feel like he's got a far lower floor, and I don't even think the ceiling's particularly high, especially not in the way this offense functions. Jalen Noel comes in, and I don't understand the Texans doing this. I don't understand why they're taking another wide receiver in the first 3 rounds. Look, they had other needs, and I think they should have been addressing those other needs a little bit better. I think the O-line needed to be addressed a little bit more heavily. I feel like they need to do a better job with defensive tackle as well. Instead, they take 2 wide receivers, and I mean, what are you even doing here? It doesn't really make any sense. The value's fine for Nolan this round. It's not like I don't like the value. It's just that I don't feel like this is a clear need. This kind of suggests to me that they feel like Tank Dell is going to be out long term, and they're trying to challenge now. So they really need wide receiver depth, and they want that number 4 guy. Because realistically, that's where he's going to be playing. Behind Collins, behind Higgins, behind Kirk. We know that Kirk's pretty injury prone. Dell is clearly out. Diggs is gone. So I guess he can slot in as the number 4 this season. Maybe long term, though, we're talking about a number 5 guy if he doesn't develop. So don't really see what they're doing here. Doesn't make a lot of sense for me. Savion Williams is an interesting one. He can kind of play in 2 roles. He could be the big-bodied wide receiver, but he's possibly could be used as like a Cordarrelle Patterson-style running back, maybe doing some stuff on special teams as well. He's kind of more of an all-round weapon, and I don't mind that pick, even though I don't feel like they needed a wide receiver. I feel like the value is good here. Look, there's opportunities here to use Williams in different ways, and for that reason, I'm okay with them taking him here. I don't love taking 2 receivers in the first 3 rounds for them, but at least he's something a little bit different than what they've got, and I like the fact they finally got a big-bodied guy who also offers other stuff as well. I still would take him after Nolan. Both he and Noel, I'm thinking like late 3rd round, potentially even 4th round is where I'd like to see them go off the board. Same thing with Pat Bryant. We're talking late 3rd round. I know a lot of people are taking him earlier than that, so I probably won't have much of any of these 3 guys on my teams. Ty Felton interests me a little bit, more so from the situation than anything else. I don't think Jalen Naylor is anything special, and I like the idea of taking Felton. He's a good guy, big-bodied, has enough speed to be very solid, offers something a little bit different to Jefferson and Addison, which I like, a bit of a red zone threat, especially if Hawkinson is likely to be gone in the near future, though I don't know that he necessarily will be. That gives opportunities for Felton to come in and at least be the number 3 guy, and I think he could threaten for this because it's not like Naylor was so special last season they couldn't replace him. For that reason, I'm willing to take a punt on him mid to late 3rd round, but you probably don't need to. You probably even get him a little bit later than that. I really like the value that he offers for that reason. He's someone that interests me a lot. I feel like this is where the bargain is in this year's draft. I also really like Shamir DK. I'm not really sure that he's going to come in and have an immediate role. I do feel like they're kind of going to build slowly. How much Cam Ward can do with these guys is going to be interesting, but Calvin Ridley is their number 1 guy, and it's not like he's young, and someone who's definitely not young is Tyler Lockett. I wouldn't be surprised if DK can come in and be a number 2 receiver very early in the season. We know that Van Jefferson gets used a lot as a blocking wide receiver, and who knows what's happening with Treylon Burks. So there's a lot of names on this depth chart, but of everyone, I think DK is the most interesting. He's someone that I think definitely could have gone earlier in drafts. So for that reason, he interests me. I like his speed. I think he could be good as a deep option. I think he can also play out of the slot. So there's options there in how they use him. And for that reason, I am very interested in getting him in my fantasy team. Someone I am far less interested in getting in my fantasy team is Donta Thornton. I don't like this pick at all. There's so many opportunities on this depth chart. It's so weak below those top 3 guys. But as I said, you're really only getting 2 guys being valuable because Brock Bowers is really a top receiver and Michael May is going to be heavily involved. And Thornton's just such a massive reach. He should have been going, undrafted free agent the last couple of rounds. I feel like he's someone who's going to have to really do well on special teams to offer anything and even make the team. So he's someone I've no interest in taking. I'm thinking like 5th or 6th round if your league goes that far. And when we're talking about these rounds, we're talking 12-team leagues. So I'm talking like 60th off the board of all rookies. Like, this is not a situation that interests me at all with Thornton. I don't like this at all. On the other hand, I think Arian Smith has a massive amount of value. I feel like he could have gone way earlier than this. I don't know why the Raiders didn't take him. If they took Smith here, I would be liking him a lot despite the lack of opportunities here. I like him even more going to the Jets, though, because we know there's opportunities there behind Garrett Wilson. He's a great deep playmaker. He should have been going somewhere in the second or third round. I feel like he can get past to Josh Reynolds. I feel like there's talk of Alan Lazard being out as well. So Smith realistically could be a starter by day one. I think it's not totally unreasonable to be taking him in that same area as Williams and Tesla. We're thinking like late second, early third sort of region. I feel like there's real opportunities there. So Arian Smith's a guy that really interests me. Jalen Lane's an interesting option in the fourth round for me. I feel like he's got an opportunity to come in and challenge Luke McCaffrey immediately. McCaffrey was a little bit of a reach, even though he was a third rounder last year. I feel like Lane's a better option. It's not like they've got some really elite options in that 3 and 4 spot. Noah Brown has been very solid for them, admittedly, but he's been injured a lot. Deebo Samuel, I feel like that was a choice to go and get him in. I know they needed a wide receiver, but Deebo wouldn't have been who I'd gone for. McLaurin and Samuel, both a little bit older. Having said that, Lane doesn't profile as a guy who can come in and be a number 1 option. He's more of a guy that I think could challenge for the number 3 spot. So if you're looking for someone to just be a real depth option in a deeper league, I think late 4th round, you could consider him, but I'm not particularly excited about him. I feel like there's a little bit more excitement to be had about someone like a Jalen Royals. Very good yak receiver. Could have gone earlier than this. This is a bit of a crowded depth chart, but think about Rashee Rice. We don't even know what's happening with him. Xavier Worthy's obviously solid. Marquise Brown is too. But behind that, Juju Smith-Schuster's pretty much cooked by now. And they've got a whole heap of other random names and draft busts who they're trying to rebuild and get something out of. So for that reason, Royals interests me a little bit. I feel like you can get him kind of mid to late 4th round and stash him and just see what happens if you're in a league with deeper benches. If you don't have deeper benches, there's no reason he should be on any roster at all. Alec Iamore, I don't know that I really like the idea of drafting him, even though this is a solid situation. He's a really good player. He definitely could have gone earlier. Very tall, big-bodied option. Offer something a little bit different again. I like it when a player offers something different to the guys ahead of him. We know that Ridley and Lockett aren't going to be there forever. It's not impossible that we see DK and Imanor both in there in the future, but I feel like you're going to have to be patient and wait a little bit too long for him, and I feel like the opportunities just aren't going to be there to make it worthwhile. Having said that, if you're in a situation with a very deep bench and you're rebuilding, he is someone that I would take a little bit earlier than that 19th ranking. I feel like you could take him as early as the early 4th round because you're probably picking there if you're rebuilding. So that wouldn't be crazy to take him ahead of someone like a Royals because I feel like he is someone with a little bit more ceiling than a lot of the guys around here. Jordan Watkins, I don't love this pick at all. They've got a heap of guys that are just kind of guys at the moment. This feels more like a special teams situation. And I don't know. I just don't like it. I think it's not interesting to me at all. I feel like he's going to struggle to make the roster if you look at some of the names ahead of him. Nothing to see here. Let's move on. Keandre Lambert-Smith, he's probably someone that interests me most of these like 5th round plus guys. We talked about how there's opportunities on this depth chart for Trey Harris. It's going to be hard to challenge guys like Harris and McConkey and Johnston, but you get one injury and all of a sudden things get interesting. I don't really believe in Mike Williams, and so for that reason, I feel like Lambert-Smith is probably the next guy up. I feel like there's possibilities here because he could have gone way earlier than this. He's a great route runner, got really good speed. I feel like he offers them something and could be a starting option moving forward. And is probably going to make the roster based on his special teams abilities. So I like this situation for him. He's someone that interests me late 4th round, especially on in deeper leagues. Torrey Horton, again, probably could have gone a little bit earlier than this. I feel like this is a solid situation for him. Big guy, good size, goes into a depth chart that's a little bit ugly. Jackson Smith-Njigba is obviously the number 1 guy, but with no DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett, how much longer are they going to be really getting something out of Cooper Kupp? He looked pretty cooked last season. Marquez Valdes-Scantling isn't anything special, although he did some good stuff on a couple of plays last season. Jake Bobo, I think, is naturally still their number 4 guy, but Horton could come in and challenge. The question is, how much can he really do? And I feel like the answer is he's unlikely to be more than, say, a number 3 guy because I think they probably draft someone next year. So the floor is pretty darn low, but the ceiling is there. There are possibilities for him to come in and do something. I'm willing to take him as a ceiling pick. I feel like he has a higher ceiling than, say, a Jalen Lane, but I feel like his chance of accessing that ceiling is very low. LeJontay Wester, I mean, I don't even know if he's going to make the roster. I don't think he should have been drafted. I feel like this is very much a special teams player. He doesn't belong on your dynasty team. Same thing with Jimmy Horn. This was very much he's small. He's more of a special teams option. I can't imagine him making it, even making the roster, or certainly being a real fantasy asset at any time. Tommy Mellott is technically a quarterback who they've brought in to develop into a wide receiver. That very rarely works out at NFL level. So I don't really feel at all interested in using him in fantasy. And he's probably coming as a quarterback, so you have to wait till he even is allowed to be played as a wide receiver. Tez Johnson is someone I loved in college fantasy over the last couple of years. I've had him for ages, and he was excellent for Oregon, very productive. Not going to be as good in the NFL. I hoped he'd be drafted a little bit earlier than this, but I think they see him as more of a special teams guy. He's a little bit too small to really offer something on offense. Having said that, he was very good at college and very productive. Maybe he can transition that into something. I guess it's not impossible, but I wouldn't be thinking about picking him up in fantasy. We know that depth chart is already loaded. This is very much a special teams play. Ricky White, similar situation to Horton, where I feel like you're talking about a guy who's very much more of a special teamer. Good size, admittedly, but way down the depth chart. He's not going to be interesting me at all. Caden Prather, on the other hand, I am interested in him. He could have gone early enough to be considered a real offensive weapon. We know that depth chart is pretty weak behind, well, it's pretty weak in general. Keon Coleman's still someone I really like. I feel like they're probably going to bring in a free agent, but it's kind of him, Khalil Shakir, maybe a free agent, maybe it's Josh Palmer. But they're Curtis Samuel in there. I mean, there's no one special. I feel like if Prather can play solidly, he's got a good chance of threatening for snaps here, even. So if you're willing to take a real risk, the floor is low, but the ceiling is very, very high. So for that reason, I like Prather more than any of the other guys in this range. Having said that, I say the ceiling's high. His chances of getting anywhere near that ceiling is like below 5%. So take him in a deeper league and hold on to him, see what you hear during training camp, and then move on when you don't hear very much. Bumfield doesn't interest me particularly. Having said that, they do have a history of using late drafted wide receivers as options. So compared to everyone else, at least there's a little bit of upside for that reason. But he's a low late round guy. Not that interested in him. Same thing with Dominic Lovett and Junior Berger. None of these guys particularly excite me. They're all special team options. I don't think they're going to develop into much. Most of them probably shouldn't have even been drafted. Xavier Restrepo wasn't drafted, but I know a lot of people are talking about him as a possible fantasy weapon. I don't really see it. I think this is unlikely to happen. I feel like we're talking about a situation where he's mostly a special teamer who is unlikely to even make the roster. Andrew Armstrong is the only other undrafted free agent to even talk about from a fantasy perspective. And again, he's someone that I don't want on my team. Don't get caught up in the buzz, basically. You'll hear these names floated around. But people get overexcited about potential there, and most of the time, those guys bust. And that's all we've got for our rookie wide receiver show. Please hit me up on Instagram or Twitter or in the comments below if you've got any questions about your dynasty leagues. All my rankings are up over at ffdfantasyfootball.com. You can also check out my articles over at football.rasball.com, and it'd help us out if you could like and subscribe on YouTube. I'll catch you in the next couple of days' time for our tight end show. I'll see you then.